Thank you for being here, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
And we're continuing our practical review of being time using Sensei Shinshu Robert's book, Being Time. She's done her own translation of Uji.
Why?
Yes.
Why don't you hold it up for the camera?
Oh, what?
Hold it up for the camera.
Oh, hold it up. Oh, now I'm gonna have to learn camera technique or camera etiquette.
There you go.
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
What chapter are you up to?
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4.
Present doubt. So her translation of the part from Dogen is, although you never measure the length or brevity of the 12 hours, their swiftness or slowness, you still call them the 12 hours. As evidence of their going and coming is obvious, you do not come to doubt them. But even though you do not have doubts about them, that is not to say you know them. Since a sentient being's doubtings of the many and various things unknown to them are naturally vague and indefinite, the course of their doubtings their doubtings take will probably not bring them to coincide with this present doubt. Nonetheless, the doubts themselves are, after all, none other than time. So, for the most part, although even for those of us who live on a pretty rigid schedule, I've got a calendar of events that changes every hour, or sometimes 2 hours if I'm in a really long meeting. I'm not constantly analyzing time. It's just it's something that we have this clock time that we think is real, and we also tend to think it's a constant. When those people who've actually doubted what time was, spend a lot of time trying to define that and discovered that time is not a constant, it is relative. But that doesn't normally concern the everyday application of time. I'm not worried about what time is at the speed of light as opposed to me standing on the earth. Thank you, Einstein, for figuring that out. That's in my everyday life, it's really not my concern. But I am, constantly battling this clock, this calendar of mine. So there is this tendency to question it, and wonder about it. And now it's brought into the realm of practice, which now falls under this tenet of great faith, great doubt, and great tenacity, the 3 pillars. So this is what Dogen is inviting us to do now. Is this time thing really something that is real and is outside of ourselves and is controlling us or causing us to be late or early or all these things that we attribute to time? And he's basically inviting us to kind of doubt that and question it and really bring it into our own being as really not separate from anything else, not separate from not as separate from us in practice or in existence, that it's really that we are time. And it's not something that we need to set outside of ourselves as something that we should not doubt, because we don't doubt. We believe time. We believe that time is real. We think that, but it is a belief, and it's hard for us to actually say, well, is it real? Is it how does it manifest in my life and in my practice? How am I not separate from time? How does that show up in my everyday life? That's the koan. That's the koan of Uji, is how am I being or not being time? How is time not me, and how is time being? And so that's the work. That's the koan of time. Is it me, or am I it? And if we're not separate, how does it show up? How does it manifest? How is it my practice? How do I use it? How do I work with it? And how do I question it? How do I doubt it? How do I have faith in it? How do I, use it as a means of continuing my practice? So it's this investigation. And sometimes it's the basic investigation of practice for all other things. This example that she gives here is a conversation between a student. I'm assuming this was at San Francisco Zen Center when Suzuki Roshi was there. So the student asked, it's on page 59, asked Roshi, what can you say to my doubt about whether my zazen is true zazen, my practice is true practice, and my effort is right effort? And what other types of things. So it sounds like this student probably just read the Eightfold Path and was now questioning, well, what's right practice? What's right, meditation? What's right, how do I work with that? And basically, Suzuki Roshi says that kind of analytical thinking doesn't really help you. Don't think too much about it. Just do it. It's about the doing. It's about the being in it. It's about the manifestation of that being, and just see how it works. Tenzin often talks in his talks. He says he had asked Maizumi Roshi 3 times, how do I bring Zen into my everyday life? And Tenzin and Maizumi Roshi's consistent answer to him was, Tenzin, just do it. And Tenzin has passed on that teaching to all of us. It's like, don't worry about it. Just do it. Just take care of it. Just whatever's there in front of you, whatever needs to be done, just do it. That's the practice. The practice is not just sitting in a particular posture or breathing in a particular way, or holding yourself and finding an occupation that fits into your idea of what is right and what is not wrong. You practice in anything and everything that you do. Life is your practice. Zazen is practice. Zazen is this posture of Zazen is the gimmick to get you to recognize what your true life is. And it also, in this fascal, Dogen is specifically bringing time into this gimmick of Zazen. How is time not practiced from Zazen? And if it's not separate, how is time not separate from Zazen? And if it's not separate from Zazen, it's not separate from your life. And how do you align with that? Yeah.
Isn't that Iheiji and the Dogen's monastery? Aren't they on a extremely strict schedule?
Oh yeah, the schedule in a monastery setting, in the Zen Center, is one of the most important parts of practice.
Very carefully measured time.
It is. Well, you can't say
The schedule doesn't change every day.
No, the schedule is the same, but the way they measure time was by the length of an incense stick, which would be different depending on how humid it was. So is it exact? No. But it is a regular schedule. And it is about putting yourself into that practice on a regular basis over and over again until you exhaust your ego. Because the ego wants to do what it wants to do when it wants to do it. And the voluntary giving up that freedom is effective for practice, because it's effective for killing off this ego that thinks it's in control. So you voluntarily put yourself into this construct of practice. The monasteries and center of Sesshin are even coming and sitting on Saturday morning because we also stick by a very strict schedule. We start at 9 o'clock, we sit until 9:35, walk from 9:35 until 9:45, sit from 9:45 to 10:15. We take a break, we come to do the talk from 10:30 to 11. Question Q&A from 11 to 11:15, end. So, there is this schedule that we do, but that is just the construct of the time that we're here. And in that time, in that schedule, is a little piece of time set aside for you to focus on your practice. Either focus for a couple hours on Saturday morning, or focus for a couple days in Sesshin at Yokoji, or if you right now we're in the middle of or just the beginning of spring training period, focus for 90 days as a training participant. So, and we only do that intense focus for a brief period of time, but then the schedule lightens up. So we're not constantly intense. So it serves a purpose. So there's nothing wrong with clock time, linear time, Newtonian mechanistic time. It has served as well, and even before Newtonian mechanistic time, we had ways of dividing up the day into different segments. But it's so there's nothing. This is not about throwing out the schedule of the calendar, and because you've now made that calendar internal. That's not what this is about. This is about recognizing that our life, our true existence, our true selves are not separate from anything. We are one with everything. Cliche, but it is this not separated, including time, which tended to have this kind of sacred and separate spot. Now, this is really questioning whether or not it is separate.
Yeah, this is not the first time in this passage that Dogen talks about the 12 hours. So either in his time the hours were twice as long, or he's just talking about daytime as opposed to night.
Yeah.
And if he's talking about daytime, it's interesting. I mean, it's only at close to the equator that the daytime is 12 hours.
Yeah.
And none of the Buddhist countries are particularly close to the equator.
Yeah.
Well, Sri
So
Lanka
is
is
he
really
really-
close.
But
It's,
how would
it is
Dogen
pretty
know that?
close.
Well, but I think we've known.
It's off the south tip of
We've
India.
known for a long time that it takes about 24 hours for the Earth to rotate. We see the sun rise and the sun go down and the moon come up. So we've been able to figure that out for many thousands of years.
Did Dogen say 12 hours, or
Yeah, he
did
did.
he have a different way of saying half? I wonder.
The translation of it and what that means in context, because it's poetic. He's saying, because we're even in a monastery where they practiced for many hours, they still slept. So there was a time when they took breaks during the 24 hours of the day. And I don't believe that his hour was that much different from our hour. Because if you're taking whether or not you actually see the sun and for those entire 12 hours, it still divides up evenly. It's the 24 hours that it takes for the Earth to spin. No matter what it looks like, it's still 24 hours. It still divides into 12, approximately. And we know it's not quite. It's not. Was it just short of 24 hours, or longer than 24 hours? 24.4 hours.
Well, that comes from the Babylonians. So
Yeah.
they've. I don't know how different the Chinese system was, but it's really, really old. That in 60 degrees,
Yeah.
and 60 seconds, 60 minutes, that stuff, the sexagesimal comes from the Babylonians.
Yeah, and it's not relevant to this. I mean, this is talking about your relationship with yourself, with time, with all things that you are one with, whether it's 12, 24, 48. The number of hours is, a way we divide up time. And it works for schedules, so it has an application, but are we separate from it? Does it run us, or are we one with that and hold it as within our own accountability and our own practice? So it's really the intellectual understanding of it is important. There's nothing wrong with it, but is it the whole thing? And usually it's not. The way we think about something is not our direct experience of it, because it's always after the fact anyway.
So I confess to being somewhat lost in all this, but I do see the connection to the well-worn Dogen verse of to study the ways, to study the self, to study the self, forget the self. To forget the self is to be enlightened by the 10,000 dharmas, because in this doubting time, they're discussing sort of helpful doubt and not helpful doubt. And if one forgets the self and is simply awakened by the 10,000 dharmas, there's no room for doubt in that. It's just simply being present in the world and taking care of this thing and that thing, and having things appear and present themselves and absorbing them as such. Is that all? I mean,
yeah, but what tends to happen is that people want to stay there, want to stay in this constant forgetting of the self. But Dogen, who basically said, dropped away body and mind, dropped away. The first half is body and mind dropped away. That's when you are just completely one, completely in it. But then he says, dropped away body and mind. It's a temporary state. You don't stay there. So these five ranks, the studying the self and getting to this, forgetting the self, is a continuous cycle and a continuous being. So that's why it is part of continuous practice. So there's no state that one reaches and what remains completely in the forgotten self and constantly enlightened by 10,000 beings. That's happening anyway, and you get to experience that. When you get to that, when you're in that flow, if you will, but that flow is not something you stay stuck in. So you do get to that experience. Had the experience of this week getting to my piano for the first time in a while, and it was nice to sit down and just play. And I got caught up in this passage that I was working on, and I looked up at the clock and went, clock time interrupted me because now I was late to get to somewhere. So being in that wonderful momentary flow is freedom. It's this wonderful place to be, but the schedule still is there, and there's still things to do. There's still responsibilities that have to be taken care of. Life still has to operate in a particular way. So yes, you're right. Those 5 steps that Dogen describes in the Genjo Koan are real, but they're not static.
if you're in that process, and it's not called a state, it's called a process of studying the way, studying the self, forgetting the self, being awakened to 10,000 dharmas. So if you're not there, then what are you doing? Are you doubting? I mean, you can Okay, so you got aroused from your piano, and so it's kind of late, you gotta get to work, so you go to work. But work can also be the 10,000 dharmas.
It's always a $10,000.
Yeah. So how are you, what's different?
None of those, your relationship with it.
Well, okay, but you see them as a 10,000 dharmas, so what's different for you?
My relationship with it is not the same. My relationship with it in the flow of the music is different from my relationship with it when I'm late for a meeting.
Why?
Because it's, it operates differently. I'm not aware of time at all when I'm in flow, when I'm in the music. I'm not looking at the clock, I'm not thinking of having to get anywhere or really get anything done. As opposed to when I drop into the need to get somewhere and operate in a mode that requires that I have a deadline. That's a different relationship.
In music, you also have a relationship to time,
Yeah.
because you are playing at a certain cadence, and there's one cadence that makes sense for what you're playing, and if you were to play it twice as fast, it would be absurd. So you have a relationship to time which is inherent to your playing.
Well, you're talking about tempo and
Just
tempo
counting,
and rhythm.
counting beats?
Well, so as a musician, after you have practiced music for a while, that's not a conscious state that you're in.
It's really conscious.
It's not conscious. That's
So it is part of the process of learning something. But once it's learned, you can speed up or slow down a piece of music, perhaps within a particular range in which it makes sense. But if you listen to different pianists play the same piece, their tempos are not exact.
It's not exact, but
Yeah.
but for you, you would not play a piece twice as fast.
Oh, sure I would.
Huh?
I sure would. Just because I want to try it differently.
Okay.
So, for example, the only piece that I can actually claim that I taught myself without any teacher's influence was Beethoven's Opus 27 No. 2, better known as the Moonlight Sonata. And I have experimented with different tempi with that piece, playing it really fast and really slow, with a swing beat, with a so there are myriad different ways that particular piece can be played and have it make sense and have it sound good. It will sound different, and it will sound, some people who want to define the Moonlight Sonata as sounding a particular way, those people are going to be offended by the experiments that I have done. But I've also played for audiences who don't know the Moonlight Sonata, and they've heard me play it with a slight swing beat to it, and they're like, "That was an amazing piece. What was that? Who wrote that?" And I said, "Well, can't take credit for it. It was Beethoven, but I put my little spin on it." And I've done that with I've done that with some of the Bach pieces are much more amenable to being jazzed up, and even some of the Chopin preludes. So this idea that something is stuck in a particular way, that's our stuckness that we're putting in there. That has nothing to do with the piece in and of itself.
I hear something in Alex's question, which is about how music and time are interdependent in the way that
They're not separate from each other.
they're not separate from each other, and you don't just play notes. Notes have a relationship to each other, and it is a time relationship. There's a half note and a whole note.
Right.
It's
So
sequential, not
there's
parallel,
time.
not like
time is
visual art.
Yeah, time is there, and I think that's really what Dogen's pointing out. It's not separate from anything. It's in everything.
But it is particularly in music, and I've mentioned this before.
Yeah.
Music is the one art which is experienced intimately through time. Painting is not. painting is there
Yeah.
instantaneously, but music is not there instantaneously. It is experienced through the passage of time, and you have to have the memory of the piece of music from its beginning to its end.
Yeah. Well, I think, just to bring up a possible point, another point of view, John Cage, 4 minutes and 30 seconds of silence, in which the pianist sits at the piano for 4 minutes and 30 seconds and doesn't play anything. What is the music? And it's a philosophical point he was trying to make. What's going on there is the realization of all the other sounds that are happening and that are always happening. And so it is always there, like a painting. But you carved out 4 minutes and 30 seconds of an expectation of it to be something else, and you don't get it. And so what happens is you get to listen to the audience react to that. So I don't know if that's, it's certainly one perspective that is true in the normal experience of music, but what's there when the music isn't there? It's like when you sit down in Zazen finally, and your mind settles down, and you're in this so-called quiet space, and your mind is silent. What else is making sound? At a yokoji, in the middle of summer, those squirrels and crows are making a racket. So it's the opportunity to experience the 10,000 dharmas as they always are. And they're always making music, making sound, always there and present. But your relationship to them is different when you finally settled into Zazen than it is when you are, operating in the schedule in which you're running around trying to make stuff happen. Yes, Mike?
Yeah, and during the Dogen's time, the time system, they divided the time between midnight to midnight into 12 segments called the Shi.
Oh,
So obviously hour is a Germanic term, so it approximately was equivalent to two of our hours.
So his 12 hours.
His 12 is the
24 of our hours.
Yeah,
Okay.
which makes more sense.
Yeah, he does use that reference.
So it's
quite
a
often.
translation.
Yeah.
But
And I think that some of the translations will say, we'll put the 24 hours in parentheses, and there's probably an asterisk or a footnote.
Right.
That-
There
that-
should be a footnote on
Yeah.
that.
But that helps because it doesn't make it so illogical or mystical. 12 hours is their way of measuring a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we shouldn't call it hours.
Yeah, they should. How dare they?
Call it double
They-
hours.
Double hours.
Double
Or
hours
use the
or
Japanese,
she.
or use the Japanese
Yeah.
word.
But for people that say love their job,
Oh, like me.
yeah, like you,
It goes quick.
who want to just work forever
And never retire.
and never retire. So they just love their job, but they find music very difficult. So you can flip the analogy on its end,
Yeah, they're in their flow
right?
when they're doing their job.
Which I think undermines the whole premise that there's a difference. There's a intrinsic difference between you're playing music and being lost in time, and you're being at work and being very cognizant of minute by minute. I have to be here, So it breaks down depending on
Your relationship with
the
it.
relationship with it. And
Right.
for someone who loves their job and loves music, it all flows seamlessly, right? I mean, there is no
For a while.
well, I mean, I don't know why you add that, because it's not. There's not necessarily a limit on it. They just love their job. They're happy doing their job. They would do it till
Yeah.
the very end.
They're good.
And they love music. They play music indefinitely. So you could.
Yeah, but even if you love your job, you stop doing that job.
What?
Part of the day, you gotta sleep, you gotta eat.
You do that
Yeah.
with Zen too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You love to eat. You love
Yeah.
to sleep. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it's just,
There's
you
So-
love everything about life.
There's a schedule, that occurs, and I think it naturally occurs, within this flow. So you can flow as long as you are nourished enough to keep flowing, but at some point you gotta stop, you gotta eat, you gotta sleep, you gotta do self-care. So yeah, our relationships with time, and what's going on within time, or the constructs we place on time, are in this constant state of flux. They don't remain static, because there's no state that you get to in which you're in that flow all the time. Even the flow changes.
That's kind of a measure of how engaged you are, how much you care about something,
Mhm.
that time falls away.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'm not, sometimes time will fall away from me, even if I'm doing something that I don't particularly like, because I can get lost in it. And just once I let go of the hatred, because I can do that too.
Mark's comment reminds me of years and years ago, there was a parent where my son went to school who was a geologist. And he would go out on field trips with us and do the rock hounding thing.
Yeah.
But in the evenings we had music, guitars and stuff like that, and he hated it. He said he just didn't understand why anybody was interested in music. It was the most boring thing in the
Oh, yeah.
whole world.
I-
And I thought, wow, that is very strange. And
That was his relationship with music.
with music, yeah.
All right, Don and Kirk, any comments about time? Wait, what time is it?
Well, I think what you're saying is experienced not only with in sports and art, and they call it the zone, being in the zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you're at one with time and don't experience it as in terms of a schedule. But as you just said, just life itself is sort of experienced as a schedule. You wake up, you eat, some people work, some people don't. I mean, it's not too different from day to day.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, Kirk. Don?
No, I think we're supposed to set our clocks
Yes, we are. Thank you.
forward.
Practical advice.
That's my take on time right now. You don't need to do it. Everything's electronic now. So.
Yeah.
That's true, it does it for you. Except I have a lot of
Yeah.
analog.
Except your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a lot of analog watches. Tim?
Let me add one thing about painting, since we brought up painting. There's an exercise that an author has suggested that you basically, you look at yourself, which is like the ultimate portrait of something, and you stare at yourself for 3 hours.
Oh, no.
And in that 3 hours, and you can write about your experience, but I would imagine also, again, a painting for a long period of time would also change your perspective of that painting. So I think the only difference between painting and music is music you're almost forced to listen from start to end because there's a start and finish. But a true painting should engage a person to look more deeply into it. It's almost like a compliment to the artist that you're actually willing to spend that time to deeply go into that. And I'd say I started to do that exercise of looking at myself I did about 20 minutes, and that was enough for me. But in that time, it was very revealing because I could actually see my left side more feminine and my right side more masculine. So I actually started to see subtle differences in my body frame where I've never noticed that before. I never really saw that's asymmetry between myself to where, it's not something I read in a book, but I thoroughly took it in. Mm-hmm. So I think there's some advantage to also looking at paintings for a while and going deep into the meter of a painting to see what it actually might bring out.
Yeah. Well, and the painting stays there for as long as you are.
Yeah, as long as you're willing to engage it.
And, in 2 hours, it was Alex's point. But, music does have a beginning, and it's like finite. There's a period of time. how differently I may play it, it still starts somewhere, has a middle, and then it has an end, and then it changes, it goes away.
We experienced that with the bell.
Yeah. Boing.
With the bell. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to end our relationship at this time.
For the time being.
For the time being. And get to our board meeting at a separate time, in a separate relationship at the time, or a different relationship, not separate. But thank you. This is Uji continues to be this conundrum, that I dive into myself, and
It's challenging stuff.
It is challenging, yeah. And how many times have I read this fascicle and different interpretations of it? This must be the fourth or fifth different translation I've read of it, and it just continues to sink in as I do it more and more. Anyway, all right. Any final comments before we close? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Let's close.
Don and Kirk, please stick around.
I think Paris Hilton looks at herself at least 3 hours a day.
Who is it?
Paris Hilton,
Oh.
celebrity, Kim Kardashian.
Yeah.
They're so last year.
I haven't heard that name in a